Slaughterhouse-Five, about an extraordinary man who was in Dresden when it was bombed to destruction and survived.
Ihr Schweine! Ihr verfluchten Schweine!
Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Jewish Museum of the American West, and Atheists United Studios. Hey Joey, there's an old adage for writers: write what you know. For today's guest, we can add another adage: know thyself.
We're pleased to chat with Gary Lippman, author of the novel Set the Controls for the Heart of Sharon Tate, the short story collection We Loved the World But Could Not Stay, and most recently, I Wish, Therefore I Am, or This Here is a List of Humble Appeals to Dame Fortune. Gary, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here as a fellow amusing Jew myself.
Your style is idiosyncratic in the best sense of the term. How did you develop your authorial voice?
I initially, like a lot of writers, was an imitator. I had favorite writers, Thomas Pynchon, for example. So when I was in my 20s, I tried to write like Pynchon, but I was influenced to the degree that I inevitably did write in a poor sounding version of Thomas Pynchon, other writers as well. And gradually it dawned on me that I'm not them. I can't be them. I shouldn't be them. And so I should just be myself, which led to the question, what is myself as a writer? Who am I as a writer? And I stumbled around writing, because I think writers have to write a lot to really advance. As with anything, you have to do it a lot. And of course, you have to read a lot to know what kind of things you want to write and what kind of things other people have written, which set parameters and give you permission and in some cases teach you what not to do. If writers, for example, are way too flowery, I get a little turned off and think, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be so flowery with a metaphor in every sentence, And casting about, trying to figure out what I could do or to be quote unquote myself as a writer, I began to realize that if I just told stories in prose, because I wanted to be a prose writer, not a poet, not a dramatist, though I've dabbled with both of those forms. In prose, I realized just tell the story. Don't get caught up trying to be unique in any way. Just tell the story as I would tell it, and that will be sufficiently distinctive enough or unique enough or authentically myself enough, especially when I then go back and edit it and improve it, as one does when one edits, that would be sufficiently, quote unquote, myself as to be my authorial self and have my authorial voice. So it was a lot of trial and error and imitation, inadvertent imitation, then rejecting that and just muddling my way forward till I finally got to the point where I just write.
Your writings reveal a lot about yourself, I'd say more so than the average author. Are you ever hesitant to put so much of yourself on the page?
Well, I am now. I was just talking with friends last night. A friend of mine's a musician and actor who I was hanging out with last night. And we were talking about how he's a songwriter, especially. And we were saying how in this day and age, it's a whole different story being self-revelatory in public because you get, in some cases, canceled, in other cases, doxxed, people all, it's a free-for-all. online. And so you do hesitate in putting yourself out there. But I had a great mentor in writing, the novelist Harry Crews, who was a great writer. He died about 12, 13 years ago. He was a great friend and an inspiration. He published many novels and books of essays. He was Southern, a Southern Baptist, tough guy, karate black belt, heroin addict, bodybuilder, bar fighter, wild man of American letters. And Harry used to have a phrase for his writing. As a writer or as an artist in general, one must get naked on the page if you're a writer. Be vulnerable, be truthful, even to the point of embarrassment. So while I do try to be careful about not offending people, especially punching down and offending people who really should not be offended, who I would not offend ever, you know. While you have to be conscious about not punching down, um, I do think Harry Crews's program of quote unquote getting naked is a noble one for writers to do. My first novel was very much a made up story set in Hollywood. My second book was, as you mentioned, Joey, a book of short stories, one sentence stories, so very short stories. And most of those were made up or just had a kernel of truth in them. So with this book, I wanted to dabble with what's called now autofiction, where I'm not bound to the truth as in a memoir, but I am nevertheless drawing on my life a lot and making the main character myself, Gary Lippman, and writing about real people in my life. But feeling the liberty of changing stories, changing names when I need to, in certain cases, changing the gender of characters or the background of characters for my artistic purposes. So I wanted to, with this book, be more self-revelatory than in the previous ones. And I did try to get naked on the page. Um, I mentioned at one point in the book that I'm not able to get completely naked on the page, but that inevitably there are times and subjects that I just can't go there. Even in my own mind sometimes, the way we deny things to ourselves or censor memories, bury memories that are painful. But I tried to give it my best shot with this.
I'm wondering if you're a fan of maybe Kurt Vonnegut, who also sort of implanted himself in his own stories, wrote somewhat autobiographically, but also couched it in more fantastical, farcical kind of landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Vonnegut is a huge influence for me, and I love Slaughterhouse-Five, where on one hand, he's telling all about his very real and deeply disturbing experience as a prisoner of war in Dresden when the Allied bombing of Dresden, which killed, I think, more people than in Hiroshima, um, in one night. And that very real experience that he reports almost journalistically, yet he's got, space travel in there and, multi-dimensional alien characters from that planet Tremalfador, I think. So I mean, that's a really wonderful example of the ultimate auto-fictional setup where you've got an all too real experience that he's reporting in a granular way, with the details just so, yet the ultimate flight of silly fantasy, and it works. I think that, by the way, I should add, that's my favorite Vonnegut book. Probably the most celebrated of all his books, but I've always preferred that to all the others.
Speaking of absurdities and fantasy and reality sort of bouncing off each other, I know you're a big fan of the Museum of Jurassic Technology as well. You want to give a plug for that?
This Museum of Jurassic Technology, which is in Culver City in Los Angeles, open to the public. And it's a fascinating place. It's been open almost 30 years, I think. And it was created by a very enigmatic, wonderful, artistic visionary named David Wilson. And the museum has these beautifully mounted exhibits in a beautiful museum space. And these exhibits are really esoteric and unusual. For example, I'm wearing right here, I don't know if the viewers can see, looks like an astronaut. It's actually a cosmonaut from the Soviet Union days. And this was, I bought in the gift shop of the Museum of Jurassic Technology when this item was sold to promote one of their exhibits, which was an exhibit about Soviet space dogs. There was Laika, who was the first, who you can read about, who's kind of the most famous. But apparently, or maybe not, who knows if the museum is right about this. It's a bit cryptic and mysterious. In the museum, the exhibit posited many space dogs who followed Laika, who were sent up in capsules to test a mammal in space. I think those dogs never returned to Earth alive, so they were sacrificed to sacrificed to science.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe.
I'm intrigued by the aforementioned book, We Love the World But Could Not Stay, a collection of microfiction. Could you tell us a little more about those single sentence stories?
Well, I'd always been a fan of microfiction. I'd always loved, apparently it's apocryphal, the Hemingway thing that many people have heard about. When asked to write a 6-word story, Hemingway came up with, I think, the very powerful 6-word story, For Sale, Baby Shoes, Never Used. That really is pretty cool. I hope you guys agree. It breaks your heart in 6 words. During COVID, I was alone for a lot of time, as many people were. I had just published a book of my novel set in Hollywood, which was 400 pages. So I thought, next book, I'd like to do something shorter, maybe stories. And then I had the idea, how about if I do microfiction of my own? I dabbled with that form before myself, and as I say, I've read it a lot. So I took off I wrote a few one-sentence stories and then took off like a shot, writing them. I found them really fun to write, to the point where even when my book was in galleys, I kept writing them, wanting to squeeze more in. It was pretty hard to stop, but finally I did, because I thought, enough's enough. So there's something like 400. And, the idea is people can just dip into it. I did write it in a way that the stories have characters who recur, 2 characters in particular who recur throughout the book. And I ordered the stories in a way that if you read the book from cover to cover, front to back, the stories would build, things would build on each other. But I did not write it in such a way that you can't enjoy it. You can still enjoy it by opening to the middle and reading a story and just enjoying that and jumping around. So you can have it both ways. That was a thrill to write, and I miss writing one-sentence stories, but you have to press on.
Your latest book, I Wish Therefore I Am, is, among other things, a stream of consciousness experimental memoir. The book transcends description, but I'm wondering how you described it in the proposal.
It was actually my publisher who, reading it before I even proposed it, I just sent him an early draft, and in discussing it, he called it an experimental memoir. But I expanded on that by saying, in my then subsequent discussions with him, and I use this in the description of the book, I call it uh, an experimental memoir, surrealist adventure, and self-help meditation. So I tried to ladle into it as much wisdom as I've encountered in my life. So there's a lot of philosophical ruminations, never too serious, as well as flights of fancy and imaginary trips of all sorts, geographical and otherwise, and a lot of twisted memories and regrets and um, fantasies drawn from my actual life. People I've known, people I wish I'd known, people I regret having known. And so it's as I said, I guess you could file it under autofiction, which is that current term now, but it's got a lot more than that.
Do you still have a fear of ninjas?
Yeah. Here's a bit of fiction. I do not have an excessive fear of ninjas. That's sort of a literary trope I use. I certainly am fascinated by ninjas. And at one point, I give you about a page of research into the history and sociology of ninja warfare, including a fact I discovered that I mentioned. There was one ninja, of course, ninjas being the mysterious Japanese assassins from the past, who really did exist, masters of exotic weaponry and even supposedly supernatural powers. But I loved discovering in the course of my research that one ninja to complete an assassination of like a Japanese warlord who was extremely well protected by bodyguards, the ninja realized the only way he could kill this guy was by hiding inside the warlord's toilet. So that when the warlord sat down, the ninja had a bladed weapon and could jab up, which I mentioned in my book, has now made me look very carefully inside every toilet that I'm about to sit on. Guys, I don't really do that. I tend to sit down, though I have heard about snakes who've come up through toilets, and attacked the seated victim.
The fear of restrooms is actually quite ancient. I happen to be looking at the Talmud of all places, Brachot 62a, where it talked about the fear of demons haunting bathrooms being so pervasive that one of the rabbi's mothers actually raised a lamb that he would take with him to the restroom to make the experience a little less dangerous.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. That's the kind of thing. As soon as I heard that, I thought, I wish I had that little factoid in my book, because one of the things about my book was I have this framework of wishes. It's like a wish list. And I recognize that wishes are a really useful trope because you could wish something didn't happen. You could wish it did happen. You could wish for world peace. You could wish for a certain attractive person to not have turned you down once. I don't think I mentioned this in my book, but I once at a college fraternity party, I had a young woman, I was about 18. I had a young woman standing on the edge of the dance floor. So I approached her and said, hi, and took all my courage to approach her then and say, hi, want to dance? And I still remember how she looked at me and actually looked me over head to toe. And then with a totally serious demeanor, shook her head and said, not with you, which was crushing to my 18-year-old psyche. And as I recall, I didn't know what to say. I didn't have a good snappy comeback. I just turned, walked away from the dance floor, out of the fraternity house, back to my dormitory, into my bed, got in bed, and called it a night. I was done. My ego was crushed sufficiently that I needed a good night's sleep before I could begin to rouse it again to face the world. Now, of course, I realize that's a great story I'm telling all these years later. So a memory, so wishes. I wish that hadn't happened. I wish she'd said yes, or I wish I'd had a snappy comeback, you know? So I recognized when I began this book that wishes was a really cool, having a wish list was a really cool form to do. So I could imagine writing in the book, I wish that if I was the type to be afraid of going into a bathroom alone, that my mother could have followed the Talmudic tradition of giving me my own lamb to go with me into the bathroom. And now I'm telling you guys, I wish I had known about that to include in my book, because my book is chock-a-block full of Talmudic and Taoist and Buddhist and historical facts, fun facts I came across during the year and a half I wrote the book that I'd find a way to put in. They had to be interesting. They had to be meaningful in a way. But that one about the lamb in the bathroom with the child would have been interesting and meaningful enough to include. So I wish I'd known you back then when I was writing it, Jonathan.
Among those who have praised I Wish Therefore I Am is Eugene Hutz of Gogol Bordello. He wrote, Lippman's predisposition to unbury every possible source of joy, however small and however well hidden in the rough, makes the author a Don Quixote on a bliss crusade. Plus, damn, this motherfucker can spell. Do you know Eugene?
I do know Eugene. He's a close friend, and he's an incredibly inspiring and wise and wonderful person. He's a very kind, lovely guy and a lot of fun. And if any of your listeners don't know the music of his band, Gogol Bordello, just that name is terrific, right? Gogol Bordello. It's very perfect for the humor and the transgressiveness and the great spirit of Eugene's music with his band, his merry band. He's one of the best live performers I've ever seen.
But I'm a wanderlust kid. I stay on the run. Let me out. Let me be gone. Into a world beat of Rosiah. I saw new history of a guy. New history of
And when we finally met and became friendly, it was a great treat. And so when I asked him to blurb the book, I was very flattered. He said yes. And I love, Joey, that I'm glad you read that last part of the blurb where he says, plus, damn, this motherfucker can spell. I think that's terrific. I've had some great blurbs for my other books, but I think that's my single favorite line from a person who's blurbed one of my books.
Could you read a little bit from the book to give our audience a taste?
Here's a part that kind of gives you a sense of the type of book it is. This is from smack dab in the middle of the book, beginning of a chapter. And it goes like this. How many sunsets have I witnessed in my lifetime? How many times have I coughed, scratched my ear, said I love you, said I wish? How many times have I declined to write down a good idea because I'd figured I'd remember it, and then I promptly forgot it? How many footsteps have I taken, and where have they led me? I wish I could learn the answers to these questions. About the footsteps, for example. Would seeing where I've walked disturb me? Would being reminded where I haven't walked disturb me? Which would disturb me more? Walking. I wish I could walk it tall, walk it proud. I wish I could walk like a panther while walking on the moon. I wish I could walk right back to you, or If you deserve the Nancy Sinatra boots treatment, walk right over you. I wish that clad in a deep-sea diving suit, I could walk on the Pacific floor, left alone by barracudas, jellyfish, and killer squids, until I arrive at some glass-domed, sunken civilization, an Atlantis, or a Lemuria, or a Mu, where I would be welcomed. Whether underwater or otherwise, I wish I could walk a mile in your shoes, or at least take a load off my feet while you walk that mile in mine.
What's the best way to keep up with what you're doing?
Thank you for asking. I have a website, Gary Lippman Official. That's GaryLippman official.com. And I'm on all the social media sites with that tag, Gary Lippman Official. And you can buy my book in the better bookstores. I always recommend independent bookstores or order from them. You could order from from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Lately, it's been sold out from those sites. At least it was. So you can always order from my publisher, rarebirdlit.org, or is it .com? I think it's .org. And just remember Rare Bird Lit. And the other sites should have the book available as well. And thanks to your listeners for indulging me.
And thank you, Gary, for joining us.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you well.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.